really strange things happen all the time.
Welcome to Deep Focus. I'm Matt.
And I'm Nate.
And tonight we're talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia.
Yeah, I saw this in the theater. I had seen Boogie Nights, I think, right shortly before it. I saw that on DVD. And so I was aware of Paul Thomas Anderson. There was a lot of buzz about this movie, and it obviously had a lot of critical acclaim too. And I remember going to see it being really kind of overwhelmed by it, in a good way, not in a bad way, but just the sense that it was just this overarching, massive kind of movie. And I think
it's an epic for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the whole point. Paul Thomas Anderson wanted to make an epic about things that really aren't typically an epic, right? You know, it's not a war movie. Yeah, it's not a war movie. It's not any of those things. It's very intimate family dynamics. It's very much, I think he called it even the San Fernando Valley epic or something like that. And it definitely has that feel to it. But I think it might be worth just thinking about this movie first about the time in which it came out. That was one of those years in movies that was, I think, a fairly significant year. We previously talked about The Limey, which is also from 1999.
Yeah, The Insider.
Yep, The Insider, that's right. It was a big year for movies. And there's like certain years that do come out, like 1939 with Gone with the Wind or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and then 62 has like Lawrence of Arabia and To Kill a Mockingbird. There's just certain years where you get really high density, good and memorable movies.
Yeah.
1999 is one of those, and I think it's kind of one that marked a turning point because you'd had this independent film growing throughout the 90s, really starting with things like The Crying Game, or you think
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction is probably obviously one of the ones that really lands, and it creates a lot of imitators of it. And then by 1999, it kind of like that moved into the mainstream and became what audiences were very interested in. And directors were being given a certain kind of freedom, a license that really didn't exist afterwards, I think.
There seemed to be an appetite for more adventurous standalone films, I guess, thematically as well. We haven't really talked about Paul Thomas Anderson beyond, we did a podcast on Punch Drunk Love.
Right. I did a work print on There Will Be Blood as well. But
but in terms of a discussion, I don't think we've really talked about him on camera.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's obviously considered one of the top shelf directors in America at this point, and for good reason, I think. It's kind of interesting, though, because, I mean, this film really belongs to that part of his catalog that I think a lot of people forget about. You know, people seem to act like his career started with There Will Be Blood, which is strange to me because he had a lot of strong films before that. You know, maybe his own style didn't really come into its own until that film. You know, I look at his early films as being very, very influenced by other filmmakers, Scorsese in particular, especially Boogie Nights.
Robert Altman's another one. I mean, you see in this movie, I think, a lot of the Altman influence in many ways.
For sure, yeah. Kind of this idea of an ensemble picture and very character, actor-driven. But this film really stands out as, I think, still one of his best films. I do have my issues with it, and we'll get into that for sure, but it still holds up very well. And watching it again for our conversation, I hadn't seen it for many years, so it was interesting revisiting it. And the propulsive quality of it, the energy of it, is really striking and quite infectious. And it's kind of one of those films I look at as really kind of an inspiration for as a filmmaker, just getting excited about the idea of cinema. You know, Goodfellas is another film that I turn to as well, just as a source of inspiration. You can just feel the energy of the director, the voice of the director in this film in particular. What are your thoughts on P.T. Anderson in general?
I like him. I think he's a good director. I don't know if I quite I don't think I'll immediately just gravitate to everything he does. And I think he's made some good movies that also have some flaws in it. And this would be one of those where I would call this a great movie. I think it does obtain greatness, even though it has some messiness and it has things that don't work in it.
Yeah.
As you alluded to, I mean, there's some obvious failings in it. and excesses. And I do think it's kind of a unique thing because it does seem like there's a very clear voice of a director here, but it's also a very immature voice. He seems to be relying very heavily on others as he's telling the story. And we named a couple of them, but another person, John Cassavetes, I think,
for sure,
influenced him with just the long takes, the letting your actors really kind of have free reign. And then I think he also here has, kind of infatuation with filmmaking, which is probably what you're responding to. I think that the fact that it's just, he clearly is exuberant. This is a very dark movie.
It's very depressing. I mean, I find it to be...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's depressing, though. I mean, it's depressing subject matter.
Yeah.
But the movie doesn't leave me depressed. I think it's because there's so much energy in the editing and impulsive narrative thrust to it. And the performances are so electric.
It obviously ends on a very hopeful note, and that's intentional. But, boy, the journey to get there is pretty soul-crushing at times.
Well, but even then, I guess I don't feel soul-crushing while I'm watching it, even though you're dealing with some very heavy stuff. You're dealing with questions of incest. You're dealing with the exploitation of children. You're dealing with adults that are really self-destructive. I mean, you have all sorts of things.
Relationships with parents, fathers in particular, is a huge theme here.
Yeah, obviously above and beyond obvious, I think, in some of its thematic thrust here. But as I'm watching it, though, there's such a kind of a manic energy, particularly with these long tracking shots. I'm thinking specifically about when you're getting introduced to the story about Stanley, our boy genius who's on the TV show What Do Kids Know? Felicity Huffman's playing this handler who's not really interested in the kids. But you're so swept up in how the camera's swinging around and moving through things all over.
Score is a big part of that too.
Right.
Impulsive quality.
Right. You can definitely tell that Anderson's in love with being a director as he makes this movie.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we should get into more of the characters individually. I mean, you talked about the character of Stanley and
played by Jeremy Blackman, who's I think very good in this. One of the best child performances I can think of, actually.
Yeah, very, very good. And he really has a few moments to shine as well. Philip Baker Hall plays the game show host, Jimmy Gator, and his character is pretty integral in this film as well.
Yeah.
And he has...
Dying of cancer,
really questioning his place in life and looking toward the end of his life and the sins he's committed during that time, for sure. He has an estranged daughter, Claudia, played by Melora Walters. And, she's...
damaged.
She's a drug addict. She's in a very dark place in her life. She's pretty much alone at this point. And she has a chance encounter with a police officer, Jim Curring, played by
John C. Reilly, who I think is maybe the best performance, the most kind of forgotten performance, but probably the best performance in this movie.
For sure. And the one I enjoy the most. And he really is kind of the beacon of light in this film in terms of just kind of providing that sort of hopeful voice or that optimism, right? Because his character is very optimistic. And
but it's not like I think this is one of the things to the screenplay, which is also by Paul Thomas Anderson, is I think really smart in that he doesn't make him so obviously an optimistic thing.
There's a sense of damage to his character too.
Right.
Actually.
He's not a good cop. You see that right away. People don't respect him on the force. But he is also not this kind of like perfect, virtuous human being that will come and set everything right. And that's why I think it's so successful about his character.
Yeah. Yeah, you get the sense that he's got a good heart. He's got good intentions. But like you said, he's not necessarily very skilled at his job, maybe not the brightest bulb, right, at times. I do love that personal ad, though, that he used to.
I try to stay physically fit. My job demands it, so I'm in pretty good shape. I'm getting up there, though. I'm 32 years old, and I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I weigh about 180. If that's important to you. I'm really interested in meeting someone special who likes quiet things.
I like quiet things, and some of the things he says in that are great. But it's hard to imagine that's how people would try to get dates, not too long ago. This is kind of right at the cusp of the internet becoming more common. But
another thing that just dates this movie is the central premise of Tom Cruise as Frank T.J. Mackey, right? This seduce and destroy infomercial.
The showcase performance of this movie, I would say. The one
Yeah.
that got the most attention.
I mean, you got the nominations and the big marketing push, right?
Yeah.
And of course, he was the biggest star of the movie by far.
Yeah.
And gets a lot of scene chewing kind of scenes.
No! You will not take my soul. No! You will not win this game. Because it is a game, guys. You want to think it's not, huh?
But this kind of very sad and pathetic vision of masculinity. I guess before incels were a thing, this movie is showing incels, right? Because he's doing this whole how to teach guys to get chicks, right?
Exactly.
And it hits at the theme of what this movie's getting at with all of its characters, other than perhaps Jim a little bit, and then also Philip Seymour Hoffman as Phil Parma, that there's all this kind of incredible damage that they're trying to work through. You know, the nurse for Earl, who is, of course, Frank's dad, seems to make another great, just good man, right?
And another great performance. I mean, this is pretty early Philip Seymour Hoffman, and just the vulnerability of his performance and the honesty of it is pretty remarkable. I mean, he doesn't have much screen time, but whenever he's on screen, it's you just believe that he is this person. And some great comedy with him too, especially when he's calling the convenience store asking for that delivery.
And do you have Playboy magazine?
Yeah.
Okay, one of those. And Penthouse, the magazine?
Yeah.
Do you have that? Okay, one of those. And Hustler?
I think, so the movie it's one of the things that's really impressive. I mean, obviously, it's one of the things that's hard to almost keep track of it, like when you're trying to do a review of all the different characters, because like we haven't even mentioned that William H. Macy is a really great part in this. And
Yeah,
Henry
it's tough to
Gibson
go
is in
through
that with
everybody.
him and all this. But as you're watching it with this massive tapestry of characters, you never feel lost. And that's, I think, a mixture of a wide variety of things that happens. Partly it's because it's well cast. So each actor, with whatever screen time that he or she gets, really can kind of cement for you a character.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is what I wait for. I wait for those calls. And I wait and I pray. And sometimes Jesus says, Jim, I got a surprise for you today.
Then just really good editing, right? I mean, just the way it can flow in. And there's times where it's obviously, if you're thinking through logically, like how this is playing in real time, if you're watching the movie, you'd be like, well, this is kind of weird. Like the scene I'm thinking of is when Jim goes to Claudia's apartment. He's banging on the door. She's got the loud music, right? And obviously someone's complained about the noise. And she's got the drugs, and so she's hiding. She's trying to get everything cleaned up. And then it cuts to like 3 or 4 other scenes. And then it comes back to them. And you're like, he must have been waiting there for like probably the better part of an hour.
Yeah, there's a little bit of playing with time.
But you don't feel it as you're watching the movie. You know, you're not sitting there going like, oh gosh, why is he still waiting there? It just, it kind of fits in, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's intended to be everything, depicted in real time either, but.
No, and it's not, but it's just, I think that, if you sit down and parse through and nitpick, you could find those things, but that's partly why the movie works so well, is because it does have the right way of how it zips into this scene and then goes over to here.
I'm quietly judging you.
And 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yeah? Oh boy, what a day, what a round.
And it gives you enough time to get situated and kind of, go and visit other things and then come back to it before you forget about it. Nothing ever feels like, oh yeah, whatever's going on with that story?
Yeah.
You don't really get that when you're watching this.
Well, and each story thread kind of has, a dramatic climax, and those kind of all intersect. I mean, not directly, but so it takes quite a bit of skill to weave everything together.
And over time, you realize
at the same time.
everything does fit into one big overarching whole. And
Yeah.
of course, the theme is, like you said, it's about parents and children, right? And really, in many ways, I mean, the line that keeps coming up, you have that, of course, that narration at the beginning with all the different kind of random weird stories,
Happenstances, yeah.
basically saying that past, we may be through with the past, but the past isn't through with us. And in a certain sense, that's what this movie is about. It's about how the sins of one generation can be revisited upon the next generation as they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, and then
both fairly or unfairly.
yeah, and then they try to figure out, and they kind of have to suffer the consequences of it, and then they commit their own mistakes on top of it, and you see how these generations kind of collide into each other.
Well, we should cover some of the things that don't quite work in this movie. I mentioned the score earlier, and I do like the score.
John Bryan
did it. But this is one of the classic examples of a composer obviously imitating temp music. And the score is very important to keep all those threads kind of together.
It's effective as you're watching it, but especially after you've maybe gone back and revisited, you'll see even more how, it's almost flat out plagiarism of John Williams' score from Schindler's List.
Yeah, that one segment, and then Hans Zimmer's Journey to the Line comes up as well. Which is interesting because this was made only a year after Thin Red Line. So to see that appear as and obviously they must have used that piece as temp score, is kind of interesting. They picked such a recent movie.
Massive, stupid decision, which is the Amy Mann music video.
Yeah.
Her songs are incorporated. As a matter of fact, Paul Thomas Anderson wrote the script listening to her music and was very much inspired by it.
And the songs themselves are not bad.
And she wrote a song for the movie, Save Me, which was, I think, nominated for an Oscar for it. So it's very good music, or a song, but when they stop and they have them singing in vehicles.
I can't stand that. I just want to cut that part out.
It's an example of, I think, the immaturity of the director. I talk about there was a certain kind of a voice here, but it's not fully developed. He's not at the point yet where, as a director, I think he understands, ooh, that's going too far.
Well, I think the intent was, this film is so intense, right, that we just need kind of this breather moment where everyone kind of gains their bearings, and we see all the characters and have this sort of cathartic shared experience.
You kind of had that already, though. I think the movie already achieved that.
Yeah, but I mean, I can see what the thought process was behind it, and I can see him just thinking, oh, this is going to be just so powerful, and everyone's going to be singing the song.
The adults, da 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 da. And
I think the thought process was cocaine. I don't think there's any actual thought process.
Yeah.
But
and the actors clearly look uncomfortable doing this, I think. Especially Philip Baker Hall. He just has this look on his face like, why the hell am I doing this?
You want me to do what?
Yeah. Give me my cigarette.
I don't judge a man by the length of his hair or the kind of music he listens to. Rock was never my bag. But you put on a pair of shoes when you walk into the New York Public Library, fella.
Look, Mr. Bookman.
Yeah, I think that one's a big, massive flop. And partly because even if it's trying to achieve what you think it's trying to achieve there, I just think that you already have accomplished that when you have Jason Robards' monologue, and it's kind of, it does sort of slow down there, and it does give you a sort of a reflection of things. You got the rain sounds, as you're hearing that. So you've already achieved that break and that kind of calming of sorts to then kick you into your final leg, right? This one,
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable every time it happens.
Yeah. And then the other fault I see in this movie is in one of the performances.
Well, I have one more too, but go ahead.
Okay. So, Julianne Moore is awful in this movie.
Shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up.
See, now, I struggle with this because I know you think she's awful, and I can see why you think she's awful, but is this a problem with the director? Is this a problem with the way the character is written? Is this a problem with the performance?
I think it might be all three.
Okay.
I really think there's actually a failure on all three levels. I think on one level, it's not entirely, acting is always tricky with a movie. Like, it's not like a stage where you can kind of see what they're doing uninterrupted. So I don't know what takes were or weren't used. I don't know what direction was or wasn't given.
It seems like her character was written to be kind of at nuclear level at all times.
Well, I think her intention is to say that this is a woman who's having a crisis. I married this man for his money.
Yeah.
She's playing Linda, the new wife of Earl.
Yeah.
She's clearly a gold digger. Now she's having some remorse over this as he's dying of cancer and claims to have fallen in love with him. So she's got some kind of identity crisis taking place. But she can't articulate it, I guess. So what you wind up with is this, she's swearing all the time.
Yeah.
And so you could say, well, I don't know if I appreciated this when I first saw the movie, but now I can say I've experienced that kind of person going through that kind of thing. I've just, through my own life, I've met those people that are in that situation. They don't react this way. So I think that could be a product of Paul Thomas Anderson being so young when he made this, that he didn't know how to write the character. But I also think that it's in her performance, because I'm thinking of the scene specifically. The writing's like, you can see the writing's the failure with it in the scene when she's talking to the lawyer, and it's just like, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
right?
you can just see it on the page, and this looks really
But even though she's
provocative.
delivering it, she doesn't really sell how she's delivering it.
Yeah.
And then you go to the scene at the pharmacy counter.
Which is the one that always seemed to, I remember...
It's like the Oscar bait scene.
It's the Oscar bait scene. It's the one they always showed clips of for this movie during the Academy Awards.
But I can't, I mean, I'm willing to maybe say that she's trusting her director and he's saying, give me more, dial it up to 11.
Yeah.
But
I think that's the more likely scenario. I mean, because, Julianne Moore
sometimes you have to dial it back and tell your director no.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a failing on her part, but she's not a bad actress. We
I am sick! I have sickness all around me!
I'm sick! I have sickness all around me!
It's
to the point where she's like almost doing vaudeville. It's just, it doesn't work.
Well, you can't be at 11 all the time, right? You can't. You have to have some range, I think, for those moments to land with any impact.
It would make her character more meaningful if it had variations and you saw her almost get into this. But that break there doesn't make sense. Even that being the thing, like the guy just saying, hey, you got a lot of drugs here, what's going on? That's the thing that freaks her out.
Well, let's talk about the frogs.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the frogs. I think
I love them.
I'm quietly judging you.
You would.
Can I just say, so like I said, I saw this in the theater.
Yeah.
And even though the trailers had some images of frogs in them, you didn't really know what that was. There was no sense of what was coming.
Sure.
And that's just a cool thing that probably couldn't exist anymore. If you tried to do something like this in a movie now, it would get out somehow. It would be talked about, it would be on social media. And so in the movie theater, nobody knew it was coming. And the reaction as that first frog drops and the kind of shock. Everybody in the theater, I remember so clearly, myself and everyone else there was like, and there's something amazing, and maybe this is why I do partly kind of have a soft spot for him, is the fact that the movie was able in that moment to make you, the audience, have the exact experience of the character. That's a cool thing when that happens.
But it's this, kind of semi-biblical sort of plague-like moment that I don't really think the film earns necessarily. And again, it strikes me as here's the overzealous kind of arty director trying to do something wacky and quote-unquote
It's the
profound.
brashness of youth that leads to that. I don't know, 20 years down the road, Paul Thomas Anderson, if he's making this today, would even try something like that.
That's what kind of irritates me about it. It's I get it. And I do think, if you had that kind of shared experience in the theater, it probably would work on a better level. But it goes on too long, too. That's the other thing. It's just I
don't feel like it does.
Yeah.
I think it works on a few levels. Obviously, we can talk about just what's been said about it.
Mm-hmm.
Anderson says he wrote it, but he didn't have any idea about the biblical story.
I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah, I know he was raised Catholic and they went to Mass at least semi-frequently, so on some of it had to seep in. Charlton Heston being on TV with the Ten Commandments or something when he was a
Every
kid.
year, yeah.
But so I doubt that. But even then, they clearly knew about it by the time that they were making the movie because they have the Exodus 8:2 references over and over and over again. It's not clear what was the intention or why. What was the impetus of it. I mean, it obviously becomes maybe I think connected back to that beginning though, where it's just these things happen, things that seem so absurd that like could that really happen? And it's getting at that idea, and it might be a way of trying to put into focus for us as the audience that we're watching these movies or these incredible stories over and over and over again, and then realizing, yeah, this stuff really does happen, even as absurd as it seems. And so having the plague of frogs, which also I have to just say, it's kind of awesome that they show the aftermath of it, where they're trying to take the cars out of it, and just
it's comedic.
Yeah, there is humor in this movie. That William H. Macy getting in the face. Especially after you had the whole thing about the oral surgery that he doesn't need.
Yeah.
He needs it after that.
Yeah, a little bit of irony.
But I think it works. I don't know, it works for me. I'm willing to go with it. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Part of why I'm willing to even go with it is this Dixon character. We haven't talked about him at all. I think he is almost like an angel figure in this movie. I don't think he's actually meant to be a supernatural being, but he has the role of an angel where he kind of comes in, that very good scene where he has the rap.
Come here.
No!
Come here. You want to disrespect an officer of the law?
I can help you solve the case. I can tell you who did it.
And I just love how John C. Reilly handles it with watch the lip.
You got a record contract?
Not yet. Give the clue for the bus if you show me some trust.
Have you ever been to juvenile hall?
I ain't fucking with you.
Hey, watch the mouth.
Right? Because of the swearing, and I don't need to hear that word. Right? So square. But I feel like that character lends the movie this overall quasi-parable biblical weight that then pays off in the frogs.
It gives a sense of otherworldliness, because he is present at key moments in the film.
He's the one that takes the gun that causes the crisis for Jim.
He finds Julianne Moore in the car, and he's not depicted as like this holy character, right? But he has sort of this kind of divine influence, I think, at certain moments.
Yeah, and his rap even, it's one of those things that I kind of go back and I listen to it, and you just, because you get the sense there's a real meaning in that rap that helps to kind of get you to understand a little bit of what's going on here. I can't say that I necessarily feel like I know exactly what's going on in the rap, but you do get the sense that is a clear scene, even just the way the music cue picks up from it, and you're not even listening.
But the debt is always gaining, and if he's worth being hurt, he's worth bringing pain in. When the sunshine don't work, the good Lord bring the rain in. And that shit will help you solve the case.
Okay.
Right? I told you the whole thing, you're not even listening.
Did you listen to me?
I was listening to you.
I told you who did it, and you're not even listening to me.
I'm through playing games. Be cool. Stay in school, okay?
That's getting at a big part of this movie too, which is that the kids are sharing a certain wisdom with adults and explaining things that the adults just kind of completely deny. And that's a powerful theme. And the frogs almost become the way in which it just kind of breaks through. It's like, you can't deny this anymore.
Well, even the name of the game show, what do kids know?
Right.
I mean, that's it's kind of asking the audience that same question. And there are things we can learn from kind of the innocent viewpoint of a child that reveals things to us in a new way that we were taking for granted.
And the adults are way up with 47. Now, that doesn't mean that this game is out of reach for the kids.